We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Welcome to Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. I'm Laurie Detweiler, and today I have with me Lexi Detwiler, who many of you all have heard on this podcast before, and Molly Nickles, who happens to be the marketing manager for Veritas Press, but we have her here because she's a working mom. And today that's what we're going to be discussing is how do you homeschool and work at the same time as a mother? So welcome, Molly. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up as marketing manager and how you ended up homeschooling.
Hi. Yes, I started homeschooling our kids right off the very first day. My husband was homeschooled K through 12, and it was always a requirement that we were going to homeschool K through 12. So before we started dating, he said, "You're going to homeschool my kids or we're not going to date." So I know it's never been an option otherwise. I've always been a hard worker, always had a lot of jobs growing up, and I went to photography college and started a commercial and wedding photography business. And so I was already a commercial photographer when I met Ben. And so when it was time to homeschool, I wasn't necessarily ready to put down the camera just yet. But I decided, instead of doing so much commercial work, I would do wedding photography because it allowed me weekends where I'd just work on the weekend and the rest was at home all week. So anyways, I switched and did wedding photography, and I did that for a total of, I guess it'd be 14 years total that I did that until just 2 years ago. In the Lord's great timing, he placed it on my heart to quit wedding photography just a couple months before the pandemic came out. And so thankfully, I didn't have a load of weddings that I had to reschedule. The Lord had provided that in advance for me to decide to quit in advance. So it's just been a couple years that I haven't done weddings, and it feels funny now to not shoot all the time. But because of all those years of experience, I decided to work from home. And now here I'm at Veritas Press as the marketing manager after doing all that. Yes. Yeah, it's been great. And I really love being at home. So the whole time I have worked and homeschooled, and we have used Veritas over the years as with self-paced courses and with the history when the kids were younger. And now the kids, thankfully, are going into the live courses. They're doing a live course actually right now as we speak in the summer class. So yeah.
How old are your kids?
My kids are 15 and 13 now.
Okay.
So things have changed. So yeah, we've been doing it all the way through, a little bit of both, the homeschool and work.
Lexi, tell us a little bit about your work and children for those who haven't listened to the podcast before.
Sure, yeah. I have 3 kids, ages 4, 6, and 8. I actually started working at Veritas right out of college, I guess. Right when I graduated, got married to Travis, who's the 3rd son of the Detweilers, and started working at Veritas in the diploma program. That was back in 2011. I figured, I was talking to homeschool moms all the time, and I was like, oh, this seems like a lot of work. I don't think I ever want to do this, but I'll help them do it, but I'm never going to do it myself. And then when I had Ava, I put her into Montessori, which I loved. But then when it came time to put her into kindergarten, I couldn't find a school that I really wanted. So I decided to try out homeschooling with Veritas. And I mean, it's a lot of work, yes, but I did really love it. And I love what it does for my kids. I love the flexibility. And I did continue to work with Veritas. I dropped the academic advising because it was a lot of phone calls, and I had little kids who would just be needing me all the time. But then I started to do more writing type things. So I wrote some curriculum and some books, and then started helping out my husband, who owns Opus, which is a video production company. With him, I was able to go out on shoots and write the scripts for him on my own time. And I still did some things for Veritas through Opus. So I work on the phonics app for kids, which for me is really cool because my kids are of reading age now. So I got to test all the stuff on them. They were my test dummies.
Yeah,
Anytime I had an idea, I would run it by them. Or like if I had an idea for a book, I would run it by my daughter and say, is this a good book? And she'd give me feedback. So it's been fun getting them involved, but yeah, it is a lot of work.
Molly, I was a working mom. I worked the whole time that my children, were growing up and we were schooling. What advice do you have when you have a new homeschool mom come to you and say, I'm thinking about either going back to work or I want to homeschool, but we really can't afford for me to quit work? What do you tell them in the midst of your journey?
I would say that there are a million different ways that you can get to the point of homeschooling and working, and it looks different for every single mom and family and husband and wife scenario. And depends on what kind of training you have. If you want, if you took nursing school and then you didn't do nursing anymore, now you can work on a Saturday, one Saturday a week or something. Or someone like me who did photography and I could create my own schedule, only work on the weekends. I would say that you first just have to take stock of what you're interested in and actually what your main skills are, and then go from there to figure out what kind of job you would like to look for. That would work within also the homeschooling methodology that you choose, because depending on the type of method of homeschooling you want to do will depend on your work as well.
Yeah. I had a mom not too long ago come to me and she was really, really struggling because she needed to go back to work. It wasn't something that she really wanted to do. She was a mom that had been homeschooling for a while, and she was struggling with letting somebody else, help her, or how was she going to get this all done? Because she said, I'm teaching my kids all day. I've got 6 children. But my husband was laid off and we just feel like there's, I've got a better chance of getting a job. I'll have Molly and then Lexi go here after that. But what do you tell the mom that's just really struggling with the fact of needing to work?
Well, I say you have to go ahead and allow other subjects to be taught by other people. At the end of the day, is that you cannot do it all. You can't have a clean house and work and homeschool your children and do every science experiment and every cooking experiment. Like, it just doesn't happen, as well as have family time and do all the things. And so I say, figure out the one subject. It's not necessarily, even if you're good at a subject, it's really about like, what's the one school subject that you just drags you down, that you just really don't like teaching. It doesn't even necessarily have to be something that you're not good at, because I think sometimes, like for me, sometimes I do get tired of talking about photography all the time. It was my whole life for like 20 years, like I shot my first wedding when I was 18 years old, and now I'm almost 40. So like 20 years of my life has been spent talking about photography. If my daughter wants to take a photo class from me, I might actually have someone else do it, only because even though I'm such an expert in it, I'm tired of talking about it every once in a while. And so like for a mom, it's not necessarily like, figure out that subject that just really just sucks your soul dry, and parse that one out, whether you're good at it or not. It's usually one that you're not good at that you tend to, to give to someone else, but still it doesn't necessarily have to be. So do that to free up your time to clean the house that you want to clean, or to work more, is what I would say.
Lexi, Ava's starting on live classes this year. How have you felt about that? Like, what has that done to your thinking about homeschooling?
Yeah, I wanted to say on the flip side of what Molly said is that for example, both Ava and I love reading, but I don't think I can give her as much as somebody else could give her with the discussions in the live course with the other kids and the teacher. And I feel like that would really push her. So that's the course that I've chosen to do online. And then I would love to just get rid of math, because that's just not a subject that our family loves to do. But I also feel like because we're on the same page about it, that I can talk to her about math in a way that a teacher teaching multiple kids might not be able to communicate with her in the same way. I know that we have great teachers, of course, but Ava and I feel the same way about math. So we're just going to get through it together.
Yeah, totally.
So it just depends. And I guess, and you have older kids and I have younger kids, and it might change, as they get older. But I am excited for her to be in an online class, to take that off my plate. I think I've signed her up for 2 classes. She also does the self-paced classes. And that's really helpful for me because I also homeschool Oliver, who is 6. He'll be in 1st grade. So while she's doing those classes, then I can teach him his classes.
And by the way, they're working because this morning, Marlon and I, for those of you who don't know, I'm married to Marlon. We own Veritas Press together. And I had grandchildren at my house last night. And this morning we were doing our Bible reading. Ava happened to be up and we were reading about Solomon. And her grandfather starts asking her all these questions because, of course, he wants to see if our curriculum's working. He does self-paced Bible. And she's going on about Solomon and answered every question. And then she answered about David and who he was. And I mean, it was like he looked over at me and said, okay, it's still working. This is good. But sometimes when we let go, we wonder these things, right? But
yes.
I think this all comes back. You said something, Lexi, about you chose to do math because you thought it would be best for your child, right? Mm-hmm. And so whenever I try to look at the big picture, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm very into individualizing things for children, right? And so it comes back to, and I'm going to let each of you answer this. What was your goal, Molly, for homeschooling? Like, I know you said your husband said you could do it, but he said you had to do it for a reason, right? Not just because.
Yeah. So, my goal was to stay married. No,
exactly. So what was your reason for choosing to homeschool for your family?
The pivotal moment for me, I knew I wanted to marry Ben. And so, I said, okay, Lord, you got to change my heart between now and when my kid turns 5, pretty much is literally. And I was pregnant with Harrison, my oldest. And I was actually working at a gym at the time as a side job, whatever. Anyways, I was working in a gym for a couple days a week for fun. And I overheard a bunch of public school teachers talking, and they would come into the gym every day and just pretty much vent about life in the public school system. And the short story of it is I realized that here were these women who were incredibly passionate about educating these kids in the public school system, but their hands were tied. It doesn't matter how passionate of a teacher that you have and how wonderful of a woman or man that she is, it doesn't matter. Their hands are tied. And that's what turned the corner for me, is that not only do I, as a mom, get to be passionate about homeschooling, there was no one tying my hands as to what my kids can and can't learn.
Right.
And so for me, my whole goal for homeschooling is to be ever changing, to really allow my kids to pursue what they wanted to pursue. Looking back now as a mom of teens now, for my parents, I can't imagine if I was like, yeah, mom and dad, I want to go to photography college. Looking back at that, I'm like, wow, my parents were super great for allowing me to pursue my interest, all the way through high school. I was, high school yearbook photo person. I was all that photo stuff. And then to be able to shoot my first wedding at 18, because my parents allowed those interests right off the bat, and then let me go to photo college. The same thing. So my goal for my kids is to be ever aware of what their God-given abilities and desires are, and facilitate the ability for them to learn those things in whatever way that is. And for me, it's shown up here at Veritas because my son goes back and forth between wanting to be a nonfiction writer. He wants to be the next J.K. Rowling, or a lawyer. He really, really loves, and I'm like, wow, classical education can do that, can either of those. And so it's been so great for that, and so, yeah, that's just my goal, is to facilitate the learning, however that looks.
Mm-hmm.
Lexi, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also, when I started, I said I started in Montessori, which is what started me thinking differently about school. Because when I went to school, I was, a great student. I did everything I was supposed to do. And I went through all the steps. I went to college. And then what? Like, I just felt like I was just climbing a ladder and I wasn't really being fulfilled. And so when I sent Ava to Montessori, I realized there's a different way to do it. And then talking about homeschooling as the next step, I realized that I could give them so much more than, checking the boxes in a school. Not to say there's not great schools, because there are, but I really wanted to focus on allowing my kids to have a childhood, kind of similar to one that I had growing up, except that I went to school. I just feel like a lot of kids these days don't get to have that childhood and just, we're done at school at like noon. Then we can go outside and play for a while. We can go explore. We can read books. We can be in nature. And I really think they need to use their imaginations a lot more. I don't want people telling them like, this is how you do something. I want them to figure it out. I mean, obviously with guidance, but I like thinking outside the box, and I want my kids to think that way. Just think differently than they're told to think, I guess. Yeah, I was going to say something else.
When I look at this, Molly, we normally talk before a podcast, and we were talking, and, one of the things Molly said was, one of the reasons it's easier for her to let go of some of this teaching is when she looks at what the goal is. What is her goal, and how does her family get there? And I think for me, that was the realization too, as a working mom, was, okay, what I'm trying to do is let my children, like you said, Lexi and Molly, use their God-given talents. Marlon calls it greasing the skids. Anybody who knows our family literally shakes their head and says, how do you have 4 sons less than 5 years apart that are so different? So my oldest is an engineer and has started multiple companies. My second son was a golfer, played professionally, now is, working on starting companies and in marketing. My third son, her husband, is the most creative person I know. He owns Opus and, makes movies, does incredibly creative things. My youngest son is an entrepreneur like nobody can, understand. Even he owns a company called yieldings.com at the moment, which is, believe it or not, a women's clothing company. But anyway, we just wanted to grease the skids. And to be honest with you, I knew that, like you talked about literature, Lexi, there was no way I could teach omnibus and have the kind of discussions that I felt like my sons needed, and do it myself. And I've even read all the books. So it's not that I haven't, when we wrote the omnibus curriculum and we're working with the authors, I was reading every single one of those books. So I've read them all, but I still knew I just didn't have the breadth of knowledge that somebody did. And then I also wanted them to be exposed to other ideas. And so, as a working mom having to let go, it actually was a pretty easy thing for me to look at options and say, who can teach this better than I can? And I'm going to go back to this. We can't do it all. I mean, I know there've been many nights when I was, when I had little ones at home, or even teenagers, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I was up, doing laundry or whatever. And guys, that only lasts so long, right? You cannot keep that up, and something has to give. So, Molly, I know you get asked this question. I saw you answer somebody on Facebook yesterday. What kind of jobs, do you suggest to moms when they say, hey, I want to go back to work, but I need to stay home. Do you have any suggestions for me? And by the way, guys, for somebody that's in her 60s, this is a whole lot easier in 2022 than it was even 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, we were not in the same place. If you wanted to work as in the service department at Veritas Press 5 years ago, you had to be in Lancaster, sitting in a service department answering the phone. COVID changed things.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
some things, I mean, COVID has not been good. There's not a whole lot of nice to say about it, but I will say as far as working mothers, it has made for a better world for them.
Yes, totally. To normalize being able to work from home has been totally life-changing for, I think, a lot of people to be able to work from home. Yeah, and I would say that the biggest thing that I say is that you do need to figure out what your skills are. If you want to start a business, I say you really need to make sure that you spend so much time on your business. Or if you do if you sell essential oils, or if you're trying to make money with some of those other type of programs like that, I say this all the time, as someone who owned my own business for over a decade, is that you will get out of it what you put into it. If you spend 1 hour a day on your business, you will get 1 hour return investment on it. One thing I had always said, and I'll speak to this because I think a lot of moms out there are trying to start their own business at home in whatever capacity that looks like, whether that's sewing diapers on Etsy to selling their art to whatever. I just feel like there's a lot of moms who ask this question based off of how they can be an entrepreneur. And the thing is that you get what you put into it, but also you really do have to treat it like a business. And one thing I always said is like, okay, I'm not going to market myself as the best photographer out there. I am going to say that I have the best customer service, that I'll answer the phone when you call. I will show up to your wedding on time. I will look professional, which, believe it or not, as a wedding photographer is hard to find. A lot of photographers show up looking very disheveled in jeans, anyways. And so these things I can control, anyways. And so we became very well known for that. And so that's kind of the thing, is if you want to own your own business, there's a hill that you die on, and you say, this is how I'm going to run this business. And for every hour you put in, that's what your return is. So you need to determine that. So if you don't want to own your own business, then you can create a resume, put it up on LinkedIn. And also there's a place called Upwork where you can upload your skills and everything, and people can hire you from around the world as like a virtual assistant, which is a great job for a mom to have.
Very
a lot of those
popular right now. I think
because so many people only need like 10 hours a week of work. Like they don't need, like the business only needs a virtual assistant 10 hours a week. You only want to work 10 hours a week, So yeah, that's what I would say are the biggest things to do that. And to know if you start your own business, usually you don't make money in the first 3 years, so be prepared. I don't know.
You have a friend who has a business that's interesting.
I would say related to that, you should choose something that fits the lifestyle that you've created also with the homeschooling. So I have a friend who has kids who are, I think 6 and 8. So they're about the same age as my kids. So she used to work as a nuclear engineer, and she and her husband both worked as nuclear engineers. And she decided that she was going to quit working. She was going to homeschool, but obviously she missed something in her life. So she wanted to start a flower farm. And I should also say a big part of succeeding in working as a working mom and homeschool mom is having the support of your spouse. And I see that her husband supports her fully. So they even moved, they sold their house, they moved, they bought a house with a lot of land. She started a flower farm, and he helps her, he builds things. They just built a greenhouse together. They do things together on the weekends. And after she does the schooling with the kids, they all go out to the flower farm. If she has to get weeding done, if she has to plant like hundreds of bulbs that day, the kids can either help or they can play outside. And and it's good for the kids too, to see their mom working, to see her, pursuing her dreams and realizing that this can be done. That's another thing that I wanted to say about working moms, is that you can show your kids that you can still do what you want to do. Like you can be anything you want to be. We tell our kids that all the time. And that just shows them that, yeah, it's going to be hard. If they watch you struggle, then they'll be prepared for, what is it going to be like in the real world? Instead of drop them off at school. What did mom do all day? why isn't the house clean? That kind of thing. I think it's great for the kids to see their moms working and pursuing their dreams as well.
And I think, people ask us all the time, all four of your sons are entrepreneurial. They've all started their own businesses. They've all done things. How in the world did you do that? Well, guess what? They were answering phones and packing boxes in our garage when they were knee-high to a grasshopper. I mean, sometimes I would remember it would take two of them to move a box of books, but we paid them. We always paid them, but they all worked. And, even through high school, our boys all worked and in our warehouse or on the phones or whatever they were doing. And sometimes I would go, oh, is this an awful thing we're doing to our sons? And I look at it now and I can tell you, I don't regret it at all. Every one of them, they saw the good times, the bad times, the easy times, the hard times. They saw what it, provided for us when we worked hard. Like you said, Molly, what you put in is what you get out. And, they saw mom and dad, working really, really, really hard. And at the same time, we made it fun. When they were packing boxes, Marlon would always be, at the end of the night, light up the car, we're going to get ice cream. So, you want to make it fun for them. But having a working mom, doesn't mean that your children are doing without, right? I think you just have to make sure that you use resources and don't try to do it all yourself, because being a super mom only works for a little while, and something's gonna give, whether it's your children or your marriage. So many times I see that where marriages give, because it's just a lot to take on. But it's also, Proverbs 31, I think the Lord wants us to be industrious, and he wants us to add and prosper to our household. So, well, thank you all for coming and talking about this today. We try to talk about things that we think moms in particular, when I'm doing the podcast, will be interested in listening to. And Lexi, if you want to close us with. You get.
If you like what you hear, you can drop us a comment, or if there's something else you'd like to hear us discuss, you can leave us a comment at veritaspress.com/vox. That's veritaspress.com/VOX.